Breaking news. South Africa's ties to Russia are under the microscope. The leader of a regional bloc of 16 countries, South Africa has been accused of supporting Russia's aggression in Ukraine despite its official stance of neutrality. It's unclear how Russia and Southern Africa view each other in the wake of the Kremlin's war in Ukraine. The Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, a trade and economic union of 16 countries, has taken a neutral stance towards Russia since their invasion on February 24, 2022. South Africa is not one of the countries that has pledged to remain neutral. South Africa, with its 60 million people and second-largest economy in Africa, has a friendly relationship with Russia despite Pretoria's claims of neutrality. South Africa hosted Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and held military drills with Russia in the lead-up to the anniversary of the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine earlier this year. Due to this, diplomats in Pretoria have been rushing to defend the government's actions. Cyril Ramaphosa, along with other African leaders, proposed a peace initiative in which they would travel to Ukraine to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russia to meet with President Vladimir Putin. In May, U.S. Ambassador Ruben Brigetti claimed that Pretoria was loading weapons and ammunition onto a sanctioned Russian vessel while it was docked at the Simonstown naval base near Cape Town in December 2022, raising further suspicions about South Africa's true intentions. At first, the government refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing and insisted that Ambassador Brigetti had already apologized for his comments. However, under pressure from both domestic and foreign groups, the government opened a separate inquiry into whether or not the ship was transporting weapons and ammunition to Russia. The African National Congress, ANC, the ruling party in South Africa, is dealing with a lot of problems at once. The country is divided over how to respond to the Russian crisis, and the ANC is already struggling to deliver essential services and combat the pervasive corruption that plagues South African politics. The commander of South Africa's ground forces, Lieutenant General Lawrence Mabatha, made an official visit to Moscow while Parliament was debating whether or not the country had supplied arms and ammunition to Russia since the invasion. The public's distrust of the ANC-led government deepened as a result. South African activists and civil society groups have been vocal in their disapproval of the government's non-aligned stance, which they see as counterproductive to the country's development. To further strengthen ties between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa has invited Mr. Putin to visit in August for a BRICS summit. Even though Mr. Putin is wanted by the International Criminal Court for his government's alleged involvement in the forcible deportation of Ukrainian children during the war, he was still given a warm welcome. Pretoria may be compelled to arrest President Putin despite government assurances that he will be allowed to attend if local civil rights groups successfully petition the court. Civil society organizations filed petitions demanding Omar al-Bashir's arrest before he could attend an African Union summit in South Africa in 2015, and the courts agreed. Pretoria's policymakers are well aware of the consequences of inviting Russia's leader to South Africa, but they keep doing it anyway. If Pretoria is willing to weather the storm of criticism from its fellow SADC members, then South Africa's stance will continue to be contentious. If secondary sanctions are imposed or trade privileges are revoked, such as under the African Growth and Opportunity Act in the United States, which grants duty-free terms to specific nations, South Africa's support for Russia could also bring economic consequences. In regards to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the SADC is divided on the definition of non-alignment. SADC countries have struggled to strike a balance between human rights concerns and regional implications in UN General Assembly debates on the conflict. This conflict is a test of non-alignment's real-world consequences on a foreign issue of growing domestic political importance. Despite the invasion, Pretoria insists on continuing normal relations with Russia. The regional SADC position has been unclear since the invasion. There is potential for other SADC countries to start talking to South Africa about the harm Pretoria's friendship with Russia has caused to the region. In August, South Africa will host the next BRICS summit. The arrest warrant for Mr. Putin will put South Africa's willingness to defy Western nations and its own commitments to the ICC to the test. Thabo Mbeki, a former president of South Africa, has expressed doubts about the summit's viability. In South Africa, civil society organizations are putting the judiciary to the test, among other things by investigating the repercussions of the government's stance on Russia and the warrant's non-execution for President Vladimir Putin. The ruling ANC will continue to face political difficulties as a result of this. To maintain the larger relationship with Western societies, it may be necessary for more countries in the region, including Botswana, to distance themselves from South Africa. If tensions aren't resolved between SADC's 16 member states, their precarious position will only worsen.